welcome. If you haven't been here before, one of the limitations is that there is only one restroom at the top of the stairs, so we won't have a scheduled break of sorts. We decided against it. If you're desperate, there is a gas station pretty close. Otherwise, please feel free to get up and move around as necessary because we'll go through. Several of you were at our Indian Education for All event on Wednesday. We're really happy to see you here as well. But this event is a very special event, and it's separate from our normal workshop agendas. So what we have planned for today, we have a lovely meal that Sweeney, there he is, has prepared for you. And we have a traditional Indian meal, a different Thanksgiving than you might be used to. But we do have fried bread anyway. We also have incredible speakers. We're honored to have Dr. Jioanna Carjuzaa join us. She will do our opening prayer, and we'll let her talk about some of the misconceptions and the stereotypes and the kinds of things that are perpetuated always in everything we see. And then we have our very special guest, Jioanna Carjuzaa, who is Wampanoag, who is here from Maine. I had the distinct honor of meeting him this summer on a trip I took to Maine, and he took me to Cadillac Mountain, right? Cadillac Mountain in Arcadia National Park and Bar Harbor, and it was a very interesting thing because there were more people in Bar Harbor than there are in the state of Montana. So that was an interesting experience. And he's going to share about his culture, his journey, and everything we need to know to hear the other side of Thanksgiving story. And then Mike Jetty, where are you, Mike? My good buddy. Where are you? Okay, Mike Jetty has disappeared. Mike Jetty from the Office of Public Instruction is also going to share with us all of the wonderful materials that the Office of Public Instruction has created and is sharing with K-12 and higher ed teachers around the world, actually, across the state of Montana and around the world. So there is an agenda in your packets, and please ignore that. We put that so that you would have a rough idea. You know, we are going to go through this, and we will not have a scheduled break, like I said, and we will have lots of opportunity for discussion. And so Twyla would also like to share something about how this came about. I think it's really important that everybody hears.
Yeah, and you know, it's so great to see so many of you here today. You know, this was an open invite to all of our classes back on campus, and you know, we even have folks from the Bozeman School District with us today. And you know, really, so oftentimes we go through the motions when it comes to just, you know, mainstream society and the holidays that we recognize. And you know, I think in the school systems, you don't really get the full story. And I think, you know, this was really goes hand in hand with our Internet for All state mandate that we have. And so I think it's such a wonderful opportunity that we have, you know, our honored guests and our speakers that could join us here today. And I think it's really going to give you the full perspective. And I think it's one, and it's a message that, you know, really needs to be heard from K through beyond 16 at this point. And so I just want to welcome you, and it's so wonderful that you all are here with us today. And I'm so excited about our meal. And, you know, like Jioanna said, it's not a traditional Thanksgiving meal, but, you know, it is traditional in the sense that, you know, it's from our First People. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Jioanna Carjuzaa. She is going to provide the prayer for us so that we can all get started on that.
I'm going to let you remain seated. It's very unusual, but that's what we do according to my traditions. I'm not going to do it today, but actually my face is on here. Sitting. We inhale, essentially, in the arms of our first mother, our own mother. And so I am so happy to see you here, especially you, Adele.
Thank you.
She was my neighbor down the hall whenever I was here at MSU. We talked a lot, or she saw me a lot. We Patsy. It's good to see you. It's good to see all of you. I want to acknowledge the presence of, I believe, if not the first, among the first group of students at the University of Montana in the early 1970s. My friend, for ever so long, my friend of the heart and of the mind, Lance Foster. Lance was the first person to get a minor in Native American Studies from the University of Montana. He brings with him his father, one of our elders in the state. You're Foster. And then, of course, there's Brandon. Brandon. We heard from her the other day, and on the drive home, my associate says, "Oh my gosh, that woman is so smart for her young age." And you are. And of course, on the stage, our hostesses for this day, Wyatt and Jioanna. Quality time with people, and we spend an hour, arrive from Wolfport, Montana to Billings in our little automobile, and I think we talked constantly. And of course, our new friend, who's going to tell us, I am sure, about their history and the first Thanksgiving. So, I'm going to pray. If you would, pray along with me.
Where would you like us to start?
I just want to welcome everyone real quickly and explain the deal a little bit, because there's more there than you can probably carry in two hands at one time. We've got, and as Twyla mentioned, we went for as many indigenous or North and South American dishes as possible, or ingredients. We have field greens, salad to start off with, and then there's bison meatloaf, otherwise known as buffalo, right? Quinoa, all right, is our starch today. And then there's berry soup, batapia, as I've been brought up to pronounce it, and then fry bread. We were going to do cornbread, but it's not as good with berry soup as fry bread. So there are a couple people who are gluten intolerant. Please see the chef. He's got special accommodations for you. The berry soup is intended as a dessert. So don't be afraid if you've got your plate full and your hands full, to just go sit down, enjoy your dinner, and then come back for berry soup. Okay? Being as you're all either students or professionals or teachers or any of the above, we're going to put you to work today. When you're done, you have to bring your dishes over to that little window by the tree. Okay? That's the deal, because you're going to be meeting at the tables that you're eating at. So you have to clear your own place before the meeting starts. That's the goal. All right? So with that said, bon appetit. And you can go down both sides of the buffet.
Thank you so much. That was so delicious. I feel absolutely honored to introduce to you our first speaker of the afternoon. Dr. Henrietta Mann is enrolled Cheyenne with the Arapahoe Cheyenne Tribe of Oklahoma. She is currently our special assistant to President Cruzado, as well as the president of the Cheyenne Arapahoe Tribal College. And for those of you who were with us on Wednesday, you all know that this has been a long journey, and she said she's building that brick by brick. Over the past 28 years, she has been Director of Native American Studies at the University of Montana, Professor at the Universities of California, Berkeley, Harvard, and Haskell Indian Nations, and Director of the Office of Indian Education and Deputy to the Assistant Secretary for the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Dr. Mann is also an award-winning consultant and lecturer. Please give me a warm welcome.
Is this position right? Can you hear me? All right. They're saying they can hear me. I was going to start off with, I come to Bozeman, Montana, and miracles happen. For those of you that was at the presentation on Wednesday, I was just barely getting around with my cane. Today, you saw me jump up without it. You're good medicine. Exceptionally good medicine for me. And this is a beautiful day. Oh my gosh. Have you stopped today to breathe that power that is within you? Are you even aware of it? That power and that potential is there hidden within each one of you until you're quite ready to tap into it. So I think you better start tapping into it now. It's past time. Because this generation is absolutely so critical. You are so important to the ongoing life of this planet Earth, our mother. You're going to have to undo and correct a great deal of disrespect and mistreatment of our mother that has been brought about by sadly, my generation and some back. Thanksgiving. We need to be thankful for that power within. We need to be very thankful of being able to walk. I, for one, appreciate being able to walk, to jump, to run, that I hope you as young people don't take for granted. To be able to be in wonderful physical condition, as well as perfect mental health. You've got to be balanced in every respect, physically, emotionally, mentally, or intellectually is what I'd like to say, spiritually. You don't have to have but I think you do, but if you can remember just in the mornings to say thank you for the rest that you have gotten, for the wonderful dreams that you have experienced, and for being able to see yet one more day. Thank you. For being able to come together in a Thanksgiving with a feast. A feast that nourishes us physically, that carries its memories back in time to the first meal shared between those that were first to love this land, who love this land, and who will always love this land, and those who came to share it with us. We need to remember. We need to remember that. My grandparents, our grandparents, were given life here. Oh, you may read in your science books that we, came walking across the Bering Straits. I like Vine Deloria's theory. What is to say that the Bering Straits is a one-way street? I don't think it is a one-way street. But that's a theory. Remember that. It's a theory that stands alongside other theories. And our theory, but our truth of having been created here and placed here, emerged to life here, came from the sky world above to live here, or waited until one of our relatives died down to the bottom of this huge body of water to bring up some soil from which earth was made. Our truth. And we knew from the teachings of our philosophers that we live in an exceptionally diverse natural world. Look about this room. We're not alike. There's not another Henry in this room. And if there were, I would feel sorry for her. Always running, guided or propelled, I guess, by what is within, to always want to help. But we were very conscious of diversity, and it is best expressed in a Cheyenne saying that was uttered by one of our traditional chiefs of long ago. A northern Cheyenne chief, or maybe I should just say a Cheyenne chief, because it was those that came to live with us that divided us geographically into the Cheyennes, with whom I am descended, I guess as such, and we were herded into Oklahoma. And it was the intent of the policymakers of that time to congregate all of us there, all of the first peoples of this land, out of the way of westward expansion. It did not quite happen. And there were some of our relatives that went south and decided, some Cheyennes, that they were not going to stay there. And so a group of about 300 left the Cheyenne and Arapaho Reservation in Indian Territory and walked back, successfully eluding 13,000 federal troops and volunteers called out to confine them to Indian Territory. 300, less than 300. And they got back north. Some of them, unfortunately, were captured and placed in jail at Fort Robinson, Nebraska. And they made that outbreak, in which even more of them were killed. But they won the right to live here in their beloved Northland. And so we were at one time one people. But the federal government divided us. So this Cheyenne chief said this. He says, there are birds of many colors. Red, blue, green, yellow. Or that's red, blue, green, yellow. Different color birds, but it's one bird. And there are horses of many colors. Brown, black, yellow, white. Yet it is all one horse. Would you agree? And so cattle, so all living things, animals, flowers, trees, so men. In this land where once were only Indians, are now men of every color, white, black, yellow, and red. Yeah, all one people. That this should come to pass was in the heart of the great mystery here. And it is right thus. And everywhere there shall be peace. As a grandmother, I would want to live in a peaceful world. I want that so badly for you. But what the statement says to me is that it is a very powerful indigenous statement on the diversity of the natural world and the diversity of us as human beings, what's done who have a different symbolic color association. White, red, black, yellow. But essentially, each a different shade of brown. You mix all those colors together. I've never tried it. My student Lance, I'm sure, could do that for me, this experiment right now. Mix those, all of our colors together, and you would come out with brown color. And we would be different shades of brown. He's a wonderful artist. He made a turtle for me one day. He knows I love turtles. And that little turtle was with me for such a long time, and then in so many of my moves. My turtle crawled away somewhere. Probably got tired of moving and went into her hole. But for us, in terms of the way we view the world, looking at the four different peoples, groups of peoples, we call them the four children of earth, or the four different relations. And this concept of the four relations acknowledges our cultural uniqueness, while it simultaneously recognizes our ultimate connection and kinship as one people, that universal human family. And we could expand that to say one family when we think of our other than our relatives who are other than the humble, upright walkers with 5 fingers. And we know that even within those 4 different groupings that there is a great deal of diversity. For us as indigenous peoples, we have about 562, 65 different tribes recognized by the United States federal government and others recognized by states and other groups. We are who we are. We are so proud to carry the identity that was passed down to us as a sacred trust. And in my thinking one day, I thought, what are some truths that I would want people to remember about us as indigenous peoples? Self-evident truths, as I call them. And I started off first with indigenous peoples have a right to their identity, to be who they are, to be what they are, and to be indigenous. But we know that there are different names. And different names for ourselves translate usually into the word the people, or some word from other word the people. But we have a right to our identity. We have a right to be who we are. That really was not recognized in the early school systems in which our grandparents were educated, and maybe I would say even now. Recognizing who we are, except in this wonderful treasure state of ours, where there's a piece of legislation that says Indian education for all. So good for our grandchildren and for your children, if you don't have any, for those that come to walk on this earth. Indian education for all. That to me reaffirms the right to our identity, to be who we are. Further, indigenous nations, and we are nations, have a right, the people, to own, to protect, to promote, and to sustain their languages and cultures. Every right to speak our languages, whether it's Iowa, whether it is Crow, Apsalica, I think, or something like that. It's sisters. Hanana Wako Hetanil. Motafatanil. Notsia. Our languages, whether it is Arapaho, Crow, Cree, Blackfeet, or Salish or Kootenai, all of them. We have a right to that language. Those were the languages given us at creation. The Great Mystery gave us our languages, and they're sacred languages. And the Great Mystery gave us our respective cultures, and language and culture are intertwined. You really can't have one without the other. And so we have a right and maybe a responsibility to own, protect, promote, and sustain these languages and cultures. We know that these indigenous languages and cultures express ways in the plural sense of life and worldviews, which are holistic and which emerge and have evolved from this land and these lands, resulting in a strong attachment to place. We're really attached to this earth, our mother. We're attached to this earth. We're attached, if we look at the different word associations, to land, to soil. Where do we start? We're all made of earth, and we're made from, I guess, cosmic stardust. And I look out here and look at you all made from cosmic stardust, and my gosh. Star people. All of you. Made to live on earth. And so we are diverse. I think I pointed that out. Consequently, there is no one indigenous language or a common indigenous culture. No, there's no one model Indian. In as much as years ago in the 70s, I served on the Commission on Multicultural Education after one of the men that I truly respected, Dwight Billadu from the Blackfeet Nation, I believe, who nominated me to that position when he stepped down. And they had worked on a statement about diversity, and the title of it was No One Model American. So I would expand that to say that there is no one model American Indian or no one common language. When we stop to think of those that were here first, our ancestors and the descendants still today, we gave so much to this world. Every day should be a Thanksgiving. And every day we should acknowledge the people that gave us these wonderful ways. For example, the Haudenosaunee, as they prefer to call themselves, which means the people of the Longhouse, and we know them as Iroquois, gave the prototype, or are the prototype, for the United States federal government, which was based upon their great law of peace. For them, a union of initially 5 nations, which became 6, and it was based upon democracy and peace. And this was affirmed by House Concurrent Resolution 331, passed in October of 1988, October 4th. And the first of, I guess, the preamble states, and I'll just read it to you very quickly. It says, to acknowledge the contribution of the Iroquois Confederacy of Nations to the development of the United States Constitution, and to reaffirm the continuing government-to-government relationship between Indian tribes and the United States established in the Constitution. And they go on to say, whereas, and it can get pretty lengthy, but I think we need to hear it. I think we need to at least a concurrent resolution passed by our House of Congress. It says, and whereas the original framers of the Constitution, including most notably George Washington and Benjamin Franklin, are known to have greatly admired the concepts of the 6 nations of the Iroquois Confederacy. And whereas the Confederacy of their original 13 colonies into one republic was influenced by the political system developed by the Iroquois Confederacy, as were many of the democratic principles which were incorporated into the Constitution itself. I could go on and read more. And this resolution was passed, they say, resolved by the House of Representatives, the Senate concurring, that one, the Congress, on the occasion of the 200th anniversary of the signing of the United States Constitution, acknowledges the contribution made by the Iroquois Confederacy and other Indian nations to the formation and the development of the United States. That, I'm not Iroquois, but that makes me feel so good. Because when we stop and look back historically, those that came here first really came out of traditions of monarchies and dictatorships. They weren't very familiar with principles of democracy or federalism. But they came here and they found some people that unfortunately have been referred to by some very, very derogative terms. Savage, infidel, pagans, barbarians. And we could give a gift of this magnitude. Furthermore, American Indians gave a gigantic storehouse of medicines. Virgil Vogel wrote a book, American Indian Medicine. And I think I was saying to this to Lance when he was in school. He noted that about 170 drugs, which have been or still are in the official pharmacopoeia of the United States of America or the national formulary, were used by North American Indians. With our own anesthetics. The list goes on and on. Storehouse of medicines, still in our official pharmacopoeia. Three-fifths of the world's food supply, including two so-called miracle crops, the potato and maize, or corn. Dr. Will K. Kellogg, and we've all heard about the Kellogg Foundation, and maybe within the past decade, the W.K. Kellogg Foundation had a Native American higher education initiative, and it was a 3-year initiative working with primarily tribal colleges and universities. And I was their elder. But this is this foundation is a result of this of the organization founded by Will K. Kellogg, who flaked his corn, packaged it, and instituted the American breakfast cereal industry. We should have been talking about intellectual property rights back then. My goodness, that man has made a mint, but at least they gave a little of it back to American Indian higher education. And I paraded around being their elder. Well, it was good. It was good. It gave tribal colleges presidents time to plan. The American Indian concept of ecology reflected worldviews which respect and accord everything in the universe an equal place in the great sacred circle of life. A gigantic ecosystem that we might say, according to Black Elk, is the sacred hook of the world. In his book, Black Elk Speaks, which is quite a treasure, a classic used in Native American studies courses, describes the sacred of the world, so big that it encompasses the entire universe. So huge that absolutely all creation fits into it. And everyone has a place in that circle. There's no hierarchy there. There's no higher than or less than. Each divinely equal. But it's got more than us two-leggeds around there. It's got the four-leggeds. It's got our relatives that fly. It's got the tree people. It's got the crawling people. All of those. Our concept of ecology. And we believe we live in an interdependent universe in which everything is related to everything else, making us live in this gigantic ocean of kinsfolk. You're my relative, whether you want to be or not. I'm your relative. I'm your grandma, I'm your auntie, I'm your sister. Yeah, but more so, you're related to one another too. Oh, my gosh. Just looking around the room now. How many sisters and brothers can you find here? And that should give reason for each one of you to just respect one another, to love each other, to do things, to always think of that other person and do things for them. And as we walk around, and we believe we walk around this earth circle, this gigantic hoop of the world, a circle, a medicine wheel, there is one lesson that we as grandparents would like to teach you. And that is to remind you that you have to make what we call someone said it was a 14-inch journey, so it's supposed to be from here to here. Is that about 14 inches? Someone told me it was. I've never taken the ruler. But anyway, isn't that a short journey that any one of us can make between the head and the heart? But sadly, it's a journey that not all will make. Such a short journey. If you're going to be truly human, yes, you need to develop this. But at the same time, you need to also pay attention here in the heart. And to live as a good relative. And that thinking with both the heart and the mind is essential for living in balance and for maintaining harmony in this world. Thinking with both the critical intellect and the loving, compassionate heart produces respectful, humane individuals and communities that foster understanding and forgiveness. Hey, we can experience it right here today. I have. I feel it. All of you are so good about being respectful of your elders in the plural sense, not just me, but your elders. And look at this phenomenal meal that was prepared for us, that we shared. And we come together to hear Grandma say, I love you, but you need to do certain things. Right? What just says here? I'm telling you this for your own good. Now it is for, I hope, your own good. And there is much that the four relatives of earth can teach and learn from one another. And that combined knowledge of us as the four relations or the four children of earth holds the promise of peace and all that it implies. We as Indigenous peoples have strong value systems, and if our value systems were not as strong as they are, we would not have existed to this time, to a day, October 26, 2012. Just stop and think of what has happened between 1492 and now. Well, our value system stressed respect. I think it's, and many others, but respect, just for an instance. It's one of our cardinal values. The Hinanoe, or the Hananoena, the blue sky people that we call Arapaho, just say this. They say when we show our respect for other living things, they respond with respect for us. The water, the earth, the air, the fire, the trees, the birds, the deer, the bear, the bison, on and on. Respect. And they respect us back. And for American Indians, and I hope other of the four relations, respect should become, or is, as natural as breathing, and is a way of ensuring good interpersonal relationships. And we need great diplomatic relationships right now. I'd like to sit in Hillary Clinton's spot. I'd like to be there right now, and if it were, it would be so much different. No. No. I'm just fooling. I'm being silly. And of course, along with respect, there's honesty and there's generosity. I think Jioanna and Twyla and everybody here were so generous in feeding us. Thank you. Thank you very much for feeding us. And we need to always remember to be humble, to walk with humility. My gosh, I really stress that in my classes, especially whenever our younger people go on and get advanced degrees, and I'm always so proud of them. But they need to always walk with humility. We all need to. My grandfather told me that. I hope I never forget it. Humility. To have patience and understanding. Love. And those values were good for our grandparents. They are good for us today. And they will be good for our grandchildren far into an unknown future. And we have to remind ourselves of these abiding values which continue to provide for us the cultural underpinnings critical to living as good relatives with all peoples on this our beloved blue planet Earth, the only place we can live. Unless you're a millionaire, unless they have perfected those space shuttles that will take you out to live, I don't know where. I don't know that the International Space Station is large enough for us. And what is important when we express our Thanksgiving is to remember that Indigenous children, American Indian children, have a right to know their heroes. They have heroes. We have heroes. And our American Indian honor roll is extensive. My gosh, you think of the people within your own tribe that are your heroes, which we look back in time and think of Geronimo. Oh, a brave, courageous man. And like the Indian nationwide community, I was concerned that the word Geronimo was used in connection with I was glad Osama bin Laden, I guess, met his due. But the word Geronimo was used as their code word. Kind of disgraced us. and that name. There's Chief Joseph, quite a military strategist. Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, Sequoia, who developed a syllabary that made the Cherokee so literate that they became even more literate than their Anglo neighbors in Arkansas and Texas. Jim Thorpe, my gosh, Jim Thorpe. And for me, my hero is the late Vine Victor Deloria Jr. Vine. In November 2005, Indian country suffered an irreplaceable loss with Vine's death. Deloria was named by Time magazine as one of the 11 most influential thinkers in the 20th century. Time magazine. 11 influential thinkers, and Vine was one of them. He was a groundbreaking author, philosopher, scholar, attorney, activist, and educator. In the 1960s, Deloria wrote, and it was his first book, Custer Died for Your Sins. Well, his books have catchy titles, obviously. And this book, Custer Died for Your Sins, was named among the 100 best books of the 20th century. And he wrote 19 others with just as equally interest-generating titles. God is Red, A Native View of Religion, Red Earth, White Lies, Native Americans and the Myth of Scientific Fact, and he wrote of Spirit and Reason. He also co-authored a book, Place and Power, which was about Indian education in America. Then there's been Nighthorse Campbell, representative and senator from the state of Colorado. Ian Scott Malmedy, 1969 Pulitzer Prize-winning novel for his book House Made of Dawn, House Made of Evening Light. House Made Up, you could probably recite it for me, thanks, but the list goes on. And I'm not going to leave out the women. And I see my younger brother's button here. Listen to the women, you'll see it. And I'm going to have to get through so he can talk to you. But there's Suzette Bright Eyes LaFlush, became a medical doctor very early. Annie Dodge Wanika, who's a Navajo. Mary Ross, who was a scientist. Ingrid Washinawatuk El-Essa, killed in Colombia, along with 2 other individuals. Their bodies were thrown across the line into Venezuela. An activist. My friend, Ingrid. Then there's Woman Man Killer, and I'm certainly not going to leave out Montana's own Eloise Cobell, lead plaintiff in the suit that she and several others brought against the Bureau of Indian Affairs for mismanagement of Indian trust funds. This goes on and on. You know, American Indians are as much a people of service and patriotism as they are what I call a people of the ego. Their per capita participation in the military is the highest of any ethnic group in the country. So we have our heroes, American Indian giants. Buffalo Calf Road woman, a Northern Cheyenne woman who rescued her brother from certain death during the Battle of the Rosebud here in our part of the High Plains. And this Battle of the Rosebud is remembered by the Northern Cheyennes as the fight where the girl saved her brother. And a week later, she fought alongside her husband at the 1876 Battle of the Little Bighorn, or the Battle of the Greasy Grass. Buffalo Caffro woman is remembered as Brave Woman, a name, an appropriate name for this woman of courage and love. Another one is the brave Hopi warrior woman, Army Specialist Lori Ann Piastawa, who was planning to make the military her career. She was a soldier with the U.S. Army Quartermaster Corps, and it was her company that took a wrong turn in the desert and was ambushed. Jessica Lynch seems to be the one that is remembered when it was Lori Ann who was killed. She was a mother of 23 years of age, 2 children, and she became a fatality and carries the distinction of being the first servicewoman killed in Operation Iraqi Freedom and the first known Native American servicewoman to have been killed in combat on foreign soil. So heroes. They all give us cause for celebration today. Next month, American Indian Heritage Month, and into the future that lies ahead. And so in closing, I would ask you and remind you to strengthen that short journey between the head and the heart and be a good relative to everything that is. And as but one Indian grandmother, I'm honored to stand with you at this sacred center where respect does dwell. And I throw my words and my blessings over you as you continue your human journey far into tomorrow. Know your destination. Walk softly, walk mindfully, walk hopefully, and walk peacefully. And as you're doing that, give thanks for unknown blessings already on their way. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. You honor me.
To hear your wisdom twice in 1 week. So thank you so much. And we have a few little gifts to thank you. When I traveled with Henry, as wise as she is, she's not realistic about the size of her purse. I have carried her purse. It's a small suitcase. When we were at Fort Peck, she bought even a lovely purse, but it was about this big, couldn't fit a wallet or anything. So after I was shopping, and I thought, I know she's trying to condense, so look at this purse I got her. I thought, there you go. And if that doesn't work, even a smaller purse. I know you love purses, there you go. But this is a very special purse, and this was an antique from Turkmenistan, and this is more realistic, your size. So I hope you enjoy that.
Oh my goodness, look at this. It is more realistic.
All at once as well. Okay.
Yes, it.
We also really wanted to bring you something very special. And Twyla and I thought that this Rhonda Elhard photograph of the 8 Crow children born in 2009 would be a wonderful thing for you to hang in your office, because you've done so much for Indian education and for the youth in our nation. So we'd like to present you with that. Of course, I'll send you everything, including the purse.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, Shin.
Thank you, Henry.
Okay, you get to help me down
Yes.
gracefully. Let's see how gracefully I can get down with my new purse.
Address us and talk about this very important concept of the first Thanksgiving. And there are very few people in this world that I've had the chance to meet that have a name more complicated than mine. But Jioanna is Wampanoag from the community of Mashpee, located on Cape Cod, south of Boston, Massachusetts. He is a member of the Longhouse of the Otter and married with 3 children. His current areas of interest pertain to the social, political, legal, and spiritual life of the Wabanaki nations. And Gastanamook is currently an adjunct instructor in Native American Studies at the University of Maine's Orono campus. He's an advocate for Indigenous issues, including cross-border and cross-cultural relationships and issues specific to the Wabanaki Confederacy. Please help me in welcoming him. We're very honored to have him here with us today.
It's a real honor to be here in this part of the world. The moment I got off the plane, I was just I could feel the great love and power of this land. It's just so moving to me, and I've been treated so nice during the week that I've been here that I have to come back. I propose to share a few thoughts with you in this flow of context. I have a film that I think kind of covers a great deal of ground. It's about 20 minutes long. We'll start with that first. And then I have sort of like a photograph, a photo book, a family photo book that I want to share with you, some of my friends and relatives back east, so you get to see some of the faces. And then I'll just offer a brief comment on the nature of these things. But before we do, in the tradition of where I come from, I am so deeply honored to speak on behalf of the sacred. Sometimes it's not easy to do because really the sacred is the source of all life, of all of us together. And in listening to our grandmother, it has a powerful reminder. And it was so moving about the journey of life. It's only 14 inches. But how profoundly powerful that is. And of course, I think all the peoples of this wondrous great island have traditions that are similar understandings, similar visions. And so I'm so wonderfully moved by her words and her heart. And it reminds me of what the women back home share with me and kind of help shape the way that I see the land and the way that I see life. And it's encouraged me to walk that road of profound love. So it's with the deepest gratitude that I shared this humble, basic thanksgiving for the privilege of being here in the homelands of the people here. And I carry the love and the respect of my longhouse and the people that live on the coast, where we are fortunate to see the new coming of the day every day. You know, I can't begin to tell you how profound it is to see Gisokwan coming out of being birthed from the ocean. It's profound. And for the past week being here, I tend to start my day about 3 a.m. It seems a little early, but, you know, it's a magical time, and I don't want to miss the kind of energy that's there, you know. And after January the 21st, you know, first light comes about that time. You know. So it's a real gift to be on this path, you know. I'm just so in love with the way of the people. I'm so in love with this land, you know. It's a very moving experience for me. And I only wish, you know, if I had that kind of a power, that all the people of the world who have come here to this sacred Turtle Island could experience the depth of love that we have for the land, and for the land has that kind of love for us. It's reflected back. You know. And the stories that I could share with you in just my brief time on this earth would sound like science fiction to most of you. But it's just that tremendous bond that the land and we have with the land, you know. Jioanna took me out to the buffalo chomp yesterday, you know, and I could feel the power of the life of that land. And the first thing that I was thinking is, oh, I want to spend time on that ridge there, and I want to fast over there, and I want to just sit with the land and counsel with the rattlesnakes. Oh, I have a healthy respect for it. So I just want to share the simple Thanksgiving for just the great gift of life, and the great and how life has gifted me with family and friends and culture and thoughts, you know, and for the great privilege to be here with you. And a simple Thanksgiving for all of you who have taken time out of your day to come and sit and to listen from the heart. Hamanitu tohin kotapano konestono taha kokos pishano e nakoshamas anakwabion kin yohaje kumane topna namekantama na wachunan kotanano me no wanap komyon ispamontamanacho piantame pitapuyokana wacho kino anatavasano kanachaha wachuna esquaganitu wakana kutani samokana netimigoho wacho kutani samokana Dabaya oski tapkana wachunan kotaname ni matino kanach. Wacham negani shikana yo pyama kisukana. Wach ankash kana wachunan kotaname ni wanapam. Toahin kotapino konestano taha. Yo hajena kirtan makunan yoje. Hamosamonat goja bahaminoch. Wach ankash kana wachena kotana. Wacho komonishun kashkana wachenu taha. Que tanto como como kana wacho tuna patanzi hakino anto kosuno kana ispomo tona yo hajenan to kosuno wacho nan to kosuno kana hakina wacho anto mai bitafu askoi kosun hino anto kosun. At this time asked my young nephew to wrote it. This is a film in a series called 500 Nations. It's on the market. I highly recommend it to you because it fills in the other side of the story you didn't get to hear. As well as a PBS series called We Shall Remember. I think they're important documentaries. You know, no matter how we look at it, the people have come here to Indian country, North Central South America, Indian country. Prior to Columbus, there was only Indians here, this side of the world. So by nature, we're going to have a view from the land as we're watching the boats come. And who are they? What is this coming? So we're looking at that. But you have a view from the boat coming into the land. What is this place, kind of thing? We're always going to have these side-by-side perspectives, you know. And I think it's good. I think it helps us be rounded human beings. So, you ready? Okay.
In 1619, a young Patuxet man named Tisquantum returned to his Massachusetts Bay village. But no mother or father or wife hurried to welcome him home. His village was deserted, the houses overgrown, and in the place of family and friends lay a field of bones. Years earlier, Tisquantum had been captured by Englishmen and taken to Spain to be sold into slavery. Freed by Spanish priests, he made his way to England. From there, he worked his way back to North America as a guide and interpreter for an English ship. Tisquantum's village had been decimated by disease brought by the same English slavers who had abducted him. Now he stood in the shattered remnants of his home. This year there would be no ceremony of Thanksgiving for the bounties of the earth and sea. No thanks for the corn, the wild turkeys and geese, the lobsters, walnuts, and berries that were so plentiful. Tisquantum's long journey finally ended in Montauk, capital of the neighboring Wampanoag nation, themselves recovering from the ravages of European diseases. In December of the following year, 1620, a small English ship, the Mayflower, sailed into the Patuxet Bay, landing at the site of Tisquantum's deserted village. The English renamed it Plymouth. The Pilgrim's first winter was a hard one. Sickness and starvation reduced the 100 colonists by half. No Indian people came forward, and none could be found. With the coming of spring, the surviving pilgrims were amazed by the appearance of one Indian man who greeted them with the word, "Welcome." His name was Samoset.
He had learned some broken English among the Englishmen that came to fish at Unhidden. We questioned him of many things. He told us the place where we now live is called Patuxet, and that about 4 years ago, all the inhabitants died of an extraordinary plague, and there is neither man, woman, nor child remaining, as indeed we have found none, so that there is none to hinder our possession or lay claim unto it. William Bradford, Plymouth Colony.
Samoset left Plymouth and traveled to Montauk to bring word of the fledgling colony to the Wampanoag leader, Massasoit. Within days, Massasoit and an entourage set out on the trip to Plymouth. Samoset was sent ahead with someone whose English was even better than his own. Tisquantum, the last Patuxet, the one person who could truly call Plymouth home. Later that day, Massasoit arrived.
He was a very robust man in his best years, grave of countenance and spare of speech. His face was painted of a red, like mulberry, and he was oiled both head and face. William Bradford, Plymouth Colony.
Using Samoset and Tisquannon as interpreters, Massasoit negotiated a treaty with the Pilgrims for peace and mutual protection. Massasoit had reason to seek allies. The European epidemics had wiped out a vast majority of the Wampanoag people and neighboring nations. However, their powerful rivals to the west, the Narragansett, were left untouched. An alliance with the Pilgrims would help the Wampanoag regain their diplomatic strength.
Why would they want to have two enemies? The Narragansetts, whom they could probably consider to be their biggest threat, or these gnat-like English people that kept coming around the country, but they never seemed to stay before. Now all of a sudden they got a group of them that's building houses that brought their families, women. First time English women have been in New England. Native logic would say, well, you don't bring in women where you want to make war. So let's make peace with these people, use them as allies. They got their strange weapons. If we make peace with them first, before anybody else does, then we'll have them on our side and we won't have to face their guns.
While Massasoit and his entourage returned to Montauk, Tisquannon remained with the Pilgrims on his beloved homeland and taught the new arrivals how to plant and where to fish. In the fall, 20 acres of Indian corn stood at Plymouth ready for harvest. And just as Tisquannon taught the Pilgrims to plant, he must have told them of the annual ceremony of Thanksgiving. A ceremony of thanks to celebrate the gifts of their world. The Pilgrims embraced the event and invited Massasoit and his Wampanoag to share their bounty. The Indian leader arrived with 90 of his people and 5 deer for the feast. For 3 days and nights, the celebration continued. Prayers and dances, alternating with shooting contests, wrestling matches, and games. The Thanksgiving of 1621 would be remembered as the Pilgrims' first. But for the Wampanoag, such a day of thanks had occurred from the beginning of time.
We believe that everything that was given to us was a gift from the Creator. So because it was a gift, we remembered to give thanks. And we did that in all the ways that we could. And this was the basis of us in our Royal life. And because everything was a gift, we realized there was an obligation that comes with a gift, and that obligation was to share. Because if we didn't share, there was no reason for the Creator to continue to give us those gifts.
At the end of the first Thanksgiving, the Pilgrims and Wampanoag promised to make the feast an annual celebration of their harvests and friendship. But the relationship between the nations was destined to change.
We gave them unconditional acceptance and love and nurturement. Otherwise, they would have been massacred at the beach.
When the English first came, my father was a great man, and the English a little child. He constrained other Indians from harming the English. He gave the English corn and showed them how to plant. He let them have 100 times more land than now I have for my own people. King Philip,
40 years while the Plymouth colony rapidly expanded. Massasoit maintained peace between his Wampanoag and the English.
Massasoit, the Wampanoag Nation, he was a magnificent peacekeeper. And that 50 years of peace maintained between us and the English was really due to his intelligence, integrity, and love for the people.
By the time of Massasoit's death in 1660, a new generation had risen to power in Plymouth. They had long forgotten his generosity. Leadership passed to Massasoit's 24-year-old son, Philip. He would become known as King Philip.
But then when Philip took over, he was a different sort of a person. He was going to fight to the end for his people.
In 1662, when King Philip came to power, the growing colonies held 50,000 residents. In New England, Indian nations found themselves surrounded. Their agricultural lands shrinking, many Wampanoag were left with little choice but to work for the English as laborers and servants. But it wasn't just land and liberty they were losing. Their culture and traditions were also being attacked.
The English, they thought the Wampanoags as inferior from all the way around from the standpoint, especially in religion, and that as a people they were savages.
Zealous Puritans set out to convert them, pressuring many to abandon their homes and beliefs and to move to newly established trading towns. With little regard for the laws of the sovereign Wampanoag nation, the English arrested King Philip's people for violating the Puritan code of ethics, the Blue Laws. Individuals were prosecuted for hunting and fishing on the Sabbath, for using Indian medicine, and entering into non-Christian marital unions.
The women, when we went out for our own lodge and spent the time alone or with our friends who also had their rooms at the same time, and we sit out there in the group alone chatting and purifying, they made laws against us that we couldn't do that we needed to be in the village, we needed to be working, except for on the Sabbath.
In Plymouth, Indian people were sentenced to death for denying the Christian religion.
Prayer would be shot was the method of conversion. That's how the first Christian Indians had Christianity brought to them.
King Philip took an uncompromising stand against the repression.
You see this vast country before us, which the Creator gave to our fathers. You see these little ones, our wives and children. And you now see the foe before you. They have grown insolent and bold. Our ancient customs are disregarded. Treaties made by our fathers are broken. Our brothers murdered before our eyes. King Philip, Wampanoag.
15 years after his father's death, King Philip finally urged his people to war.
Our ancestors' spirits cry to us for revenge. These people from the unknown world will cut down our groves, spoil our hunting and planting grounds, and drive us and our children from the graves of our fathers.
King Philip had no other choice because his land was being taken away. His people, the allegiance of his people, was being eroded. The war itself was not only over land, it was also over the right to follow our own traditions the Creator had given us.
On June 24, 1675, King Philip's War began. In a brilliantly orchestrated series of forays, several English towns were caught off guard and burned to the ground by the Wampanoag and their allies.
An Indian never forgets the kindness, but he never forgives the wrong. And because there had been so much kindness shown during those good years between
this paper that the Indians that you have provoked to wrath and anger will war, if you will. There are many Indians yet. You must consider the Indians lose nothing of their life. You must lose your fair houses and cattle. James, depart.
Through the fall and winter, fortune favored King Philip's forces. Then, a series of defeats demoralized some Wampanoag allies.
The Great Swamp Massacre was where over 300 Native American, old, women, and children were all burnt alive in their wigwams just 6 days before Christmas, December 19, 1675. And one historian recorded that the smell of burning flesh so moved one of the Pilgrim soldiers that he later asked one of his superiors whether burning their enemies alive was consistent with the benevolent principles of the gospel.
The fortunes of war were turning. With the coming of spring, their winter food stores were depleted, and they were unable to plan or replenish their supplies. King Philip's people were starving. And English troops hungry, still trailing a wounded enemy. In May, the English attacked an allied Indian force camped above the falls of the Connecticut River. 300 Indian people were killed. Some managed to reach their canoes, but in their haste left behind their paddles and were swept over the falls to their deaths. For the next 2 months, King Philip and his people evaded capture, but the noose was tightened. In August, English troops fell upon his camp, killing or capturing 173. King Philip narrowly escaped, but among those captured were his wife and 9-year-old son. In Plymouth, the clergy decided their fate. They were sold into slavery and were murdered.
My heart breaks. Now, I am ready to die.
He would choose where he would die. King Philip returned to his home at Montauk, where his father, Massasoit, had often fed and entertained the pilgrims decades earlier. In the dawn light of August 12, 1676, an English and Indian army surrounded the sleeping camp. Moments later, King Philip was dead, shot through the heart by an Indian mercenary. King Philip's head was put on display in Plymouth, where it remained for the next 20 years.
We all have a purpose, a role in life, and the Creator, in His all of His wisdom, saw fit to spare us. We all could have been burned alive in the Great Swamp. We all could have been slaughtered in that war. But we were left here for a reason, and I believe that part of that reason is to be the conscience for this society, to prevent those same kinds of mistakes from continuing to be repeated over and over. That's what I see as my purpose, as the purpose of all of our Native people who will stand up and continue with that spirit that King Philip, Pontiac, Geronimo, all of our great leaders have had.
So now you have a context. And there's an incredibly long epilogue following that. Wampanoag people have yet to fully recover from the King Philip's War. You would think that after 300 and so odd years that the temperament and the policies and the attitudes would finally shift, and they haven't. In fact, if you were to visit the town of Plymouth, who has a town motto, America's hometown where it all began. And in some of the realms of the leadership in town government, any mention of Wampanoag at all, you can cut the tension with a knife. So those old world shadows and those old world attitudes still hang heavy in the air, kind of thing. But we have an opportunity to do something about that, kind of thing. And before I share some of those, that framework and those thoughts, I want to share with you some of the thoughts about in a photo album of my relatives in my community. The gentleman that you see, where's my lightsaber? There it is. The gentleman that you see right here, his name is Slow Turtle. He passed on just prior to the start of the 21st century. He was the nation leader, the spiritual leader, if you will, of all the Wampanoag communities. At one time, there was roughly 60 or so communities that made up the Wampanoag Nation, or the Wampanoag Confederacy. We have about 8 surviving communities. We're on the rebound. It's a slow process, but Slow Turtle was the first Commissioner of Indian Affairs for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Spent a lot of time in state government, but what you see him doing there is what he does best. He's a lover of the children and of the culture. This part here, identity matters. If I were to be asked about where I live and who I am, this is how I would respond. I'm not a citizen of the United States. I'm not a citizen of Canada. We're not citizens of nations that we have treaties with. We're citizens of our own nations. And each of these aspects that identify me, Hisatanamuk, the basis of my name comes from a snowy owl. I live as a child of the land, still in the 21st century. This has such deep meaning for me, being connected to the land that way. Nayantakwat, Anochasho. Nayantakwat is an understanding about how we are to live on this earth, how we are to think, how we are to treat each other, what's the nature of our relationship. Numanunium is my family name. In Keke Tanziok is the otter. In Keke Tanziok is the root of my family. And because I come from, because I have 2 parents, my other parent is Tunaba Tanziok, that's the turtle. I live at the Great Pond Place, Mashipiotan, Babanisanu. Wampanoag is one of the great mothers of creation. It's that first light that you see on the eastern horizon. When it's still dark and the stars are out and that faint glow, that's Wampanoag. From Wampanoag, our identity is formed and shaped. The great gift from Wampanoag is the wampum belts that I have right here. I'll explain a little bit more about those wampum belts. but we still use these in this time. And wampum, among the people where I come from, is about 5,000 years old. We've been using wampum steadily. Very powerful, very sacred. Okay, run. And if you were to kind of dissect my body and take a look at this is what you'll find. Beach grass, sand, and ocean. That's the culture I come from, and there's some profoundly beautiful places in this realm. There's a place called Sandy Neck, 10 miles of dunes. A place in the town of Truro that has sand dunes 4 stories high, and it's kind of humorous that the U.S. Park Service tries to prevent the sand from shifting. It's really important about indigenous languages. I speak English rather well. I worry about sounding somewhat reasonably intelligent from time to time. But English doesn't inform me who I am. English doesn't tell me about my history, about my connection, about the sacredness of the land. But our languages do. If we attempt to translate our thoughts into English, about the easiest way of doing that is called word association. So if we were to word associate Manitou, somebody in the community might say, well, that's God. Manitou means God. But when we really look carefully at language, how culture and life is embedded into the sounds, there are key aspects to that word Manitou. In the first one, it denotes that as a being, it's unattached. Maybe a better way of expressing that is that it's everywhere. In our cosmology, there are roughly about 150 manifestations of Manitou. 150 manifestations of Manitou. Manitou for the earth, Manitou for children, Manitou for women, Manitou for life. And the root word in that is one of the roots is an. Anything with an in it is talking about the mind. Something about the mind. Something about our emotions. An. And when you put E and an together, it's a life dynamic. It's a living principle. It's alive. A consciousness, if you will. In Do, Da, De, Di, are all about a process of life within, power of it within us. So the idea about Manitou is that it's everywhere, and it's also within. A living conscious, a living being outside of ourselves, but also within us. These here, sort of, to give you an idea of where my homeland is, and this, if you can just kind of share this up. Right about here is where I'm from, Mashpee. So, some of my relatives, Popo Watahek here he's the present sachem in my community. Komita is one of the leading clan mothers in my community. These are pictures taken at my best friend Nani Pashman. Love his sense of humor. He once said, "Why is it that Wampanoag people do not like spring showers?" Because they bring May flowers. This is Plymouth Plantation is in the town of Plymouth. It's a living museum, meaning that it replicates what Plymouth looked like in the 1620s. It was organized and established in the early 1950s, and it didn't have a Wampanoag component to that, right? So it was just the Pilgrims, you know. And it's kind of humorous because, you know, due to Thanksgiving, you know, people are accustomed to seeing Englishmen and Indians, you know. So the touring public, you know, they were really fascinated with the depiction of Plymouth Colony, but they would always be asking, well, where are the Indians, you know? And it would be consistent. So the plantation decided, well, okay, we're sort of under that pressure. So the following season, they had these cutout figurines, cardboard figurines. And they had all these kinds of information on it so people could read it, but, you know, you can't talk to cardboard, Indians kind of thing. So at some time, that morphed into hiring white people to portray Wampanoag people. You know? And of course, that didn't last too long. So eventually, they got the idea of hiring other Indian people, not Wampanoag people, but other Indian people, and that was okay to some extent. But eventually, they had to break down and hire Wampanoag people. So in 1975, the Wampanoag Indian program began. And so a few pictures before that, the Wampanoag program at Plymouth Plantation has become like a research center for Wampanoag people. And we began to redevelop our understanding about how to build longhouses and our traditional wear and our food sources. So it's like a research center, and it's really been a wonderful opportunity for young Wampanoag people to understand the mechanics of the culture. You know. But the difference between the colonists and Wampanoag people is still there. It's amazing. So this is my cousin, and she's in a replica of a longhouse. And we have longhouses built the old way in Mashpee, and from time to time we like to gather in there, counsel with each other, hold ceremonies, still being used like that. Next. We have powwows too. These are pictures of some of the powwows that we have. Usually around the 4th of July weekend. Mashpee's been holding a powwow for, I think this is the 81st annual powwow. So people have come from all over. On your right here, this is one of the communities in Wampanoag people. This is on the island of Martha's Vineyard, Aquina. These are multicolored clay cliffs where the people on the island, only the Wampanoag people have access to that, and this is where they make their pottery. Some very astounding, beautiful pottery. The woman in this picture here, her name is Sherry Andrews, and she's the current chairman for the Gayhead Aquina Wampanoag community. And that's Sherry on the left. And this is what we do best. We like to sing and dance. This is one of my ancestors, James Mai. And this is my cousin here. This is this is known as a Witu. In Wampanoag traditional history, we would have a longhouse. The people would gather, our clans would gather in the longhouse for the winter, and in the spring and summer months, we would break up and move to our planting fields or our fishing fields, and we would live in a smaller, what we call a Witu. I really want to build one of those, the old lodges, and live in that for as long as I can. But I think Big Mahan, my wife, has some other ideas. This is our contemporary longhouse. We use it frequently when we're having meetings. It's also it's known as the old Indian church in Mashpee. It was the original church was put together, was built in 1684, the first church in New England. But we use it. We still use it as a longhouse. This was taken during our annual powwow. We have meetings and ceremonies in the longhouse. I love this picture. It kind of this reminds me of me. This is my daughter, Swahani. She's a beautiful young lady. She's a championship dancer. She's into fashion design, excellent beadwork and quill work, and I just love her to bits. She's a budding actress. She's been in a couple of movies. She's been in a couple of documentaries. She's doing some modeling right now in Arizona. That's one of my favorite pictures of her. And this is my youngest daughter, 18. Her name is Jusin. I love her to bits. And this is my son and his girlfriend, Jusin, and my sister up in Oakland. And that's my boss. She's the one that taught me to listen to women. And this is Jusin in her cradle board. This is my friend Robert. He's in Awitu on Plymouth Plantation. He's also an interpreter. I was really surprised to see this. I think this came out in 2011. A U.S. dollar commemorative poem. But I was really surprised that they had the Wampanoag Treaty on there. So all of them at that time, they tried to deny the existence of anything Wampanoag, and to kind of to honor the treaty. It's, maybe there's a breakaway. Something's happening. Something's shifting in the atmosphere. So it's really good to see that. Mashpee is actually a collective of many small communities into what's now Mashpee proper. But my community is Papaneset. And this is some of the textiles of the traditional bags and wares of my community. This is two favorite modes of transportation. Nowadays we have several ponies of anywhere from 250 to 450 horsepower to get around those two. The wampums are significant all along the northeast coast. The wampum is these three here are Wabanaki, present Wabanaki belts. This is a Confederacy belt. This is a delegation to the Confederacy belt. This is a Friendship Treaty belt. And much like when we were making treaties with each other, long before Columbus came here, we used the wampum with everything of significance. Marriages, ceremonies of all nature, symbols of our offices. If I was a sachem, I would have wampum attached to responsibility. Anybody who's doing anything official has to carry wampum with them. And wampum is the seat of the ceremonies. And much like how the treaties were made with the English, there was wampum. They were making treaties with the French, there was wampum. And much like how the people here on the plains, when they were making treaties with the United States government and perhaps with the Canadian government, they used the pipe. The pipe was there. And what the significance of sharing the pipe was that this agreement was to be forever. And we brought the sacred into it. So it was a sacred covenant between each other just like how we were making sacred covenants with each other as allies. That when Grandma was talking about the Iroquois Confederacy, this was long before the Europeans came here, and we were making peace with each other. So by the time Columbus arrived, most of North America, most of Central America was in some form or another in Confederacy relationship with each other. The existence of Confederacy means we're not at war. We find ways to settle our differences in council when we talk to each other. And wampum on the East Coast was a guiding force to those principles. This belt is rather, this is an Iroquois belt. The first belt, I think, that the Haudenosaunee Confederacy made with George Washington. This was the treaty belt at the Treaty of Canandaigua. What's interesting about this belt is that George Washington had this made and brought it to the Iroquois Confederacy to make a treaty. So, pretty good job, eh? This is a Lenape peace belt with William Penn. And this is the infamous two-row wampum. I say that because initially this was made with the Iroquois Confederacy and the Dutch, the first wampum with the European nation shared. With all due respect, I probably shouldn't, in good etiquette is I don't talk about other people's teachings and all, but it's a very prolific belt, and what it suggests is the relationship, the proper relationship, the political relationship between two nations. The top is representing the people of the boat, and the bottom represents the people of the canoe. The land of the people are extending our friendship and our relationship with each other, cemented by the sacred. And we become part of a great family. You in your boat, us in our canoe, down the river of life side by side, guided by peace, friendship, and respect. I'm going to come back to this in a minute, but this is a kind of an understanding about the ceremonial cycles that make up our calendar year, and the types of ceremonies that we have, and we'll come back to this. But when we talk about ceremony, we express ceremony in the terms of giving thanks, Thanksgiving. So in the course of a yearly cycle, we don't have just one Thanksgiving, we have multiple Thanksgivings. Every season has ceremonies attached to it. This is an expression, Nyantukut. Nyantukut, it kind of reminds me of the Chinese understanding about the way, the Tao, the way things are, the way that we are to be. Nyantukut, freely translated, talks about the light above our heads and the light below our feet. Nishon Hizu, Father Sky, and Jimikoho, the Great Mother. When Grandma was talking about the great journey of 14 inches, the heart and the mind. The heart is considered the seat of all things feminine, and the mind is considered the seat of all things masculine. And that's the process of how those two great forces in life, in the universe, works together. In other words, it's our grandmas who inform us what to do, and it's our grandpas who tell us how to do it. Nyantukut. I'm working on a project to describe that. I have this quirky thing about about the way that I look at life. You know? And I've come to the conclusion that God has no opposite. And that there's only love in the universe. And how I explain this is on this end of the scale is Leo, the lowest energetic output, right? It's on this level that we make room for prejudice, hate, racism, kind of thing. You know? We don't put that outward, that love power into full force. You know? So we resist and we hold back and we do things to each other. We make each other feel really bad, kind of thing. But there's still love there. You know, and if I can characterize that as an example, I think of some of the worst violators of humanity, like Hitler. You know, Hitler is considered this great monster, but Hitler was in love with his country. He was in love with spirituality. He was deep mysticism kind of thing. We would never know that part of him. You know, all we know is the monstrous things that he does. But everybody has love attached to it. We can't escape that. It's part of our institution, our Constitution. You know, the energetic level of God. You know, as Grandma was saying, miracles happen. You know, when we're open, when we're doing things out of the sake for doing them because they need to be done. As an example of that, I think of December 24th, Christmas Eve. Right? Think about Christmas Eve. It's probably the one time of the whole year that we're open to each other. We do things to each other. We're not, you know, for the sake of doing it. You know, our sense of community and camaraderie and family. You know, it's a miracle that we have this, that we're not prodded to do something. We work out of that sense of love. December 24th, and then December 25th comes, and December 26th, we're sort of back where we were. But I'm suggesting that it's really important that we're not looking, you know, if we're looking for social change, social transformation, you know, it doesn't come from revolution. It comes from evolution. We need to evolve from where we are and do the right thing. It's in ourselves. You know? We listen to Grandma in the heart. She tells us what to do. You know, and we think about, well, how do we do this? But definitely do what we're supposed to be doing. You know, those instructions are enlarged in the heart. So that's why I'm kind of working on this project, the spectrum of love. Spectrum also in the sense of frequencies, like light, prisms, and so forth. All right, this picture here. The person, he's deceased. This person is known as Wamsutta. Wamsutta. Wamsutta was the sachenship that passed from his father Usanikon, who was the Massasoit who passed away. Wamsutta inherited that position. He became the new Massasoit. Plymouth Colony forced him to come to the colony, come to Plymouth. They made demands on him that they wanted to ensure that he was going to be in compliance, you know, to English law. While he was there, he spoke of attempting or wanting to maintain the peace, but he was poisoned, and he was killed through that poison, and that's where Pometicon or King Philip came into power. His brother was poisoned by Plymouth, and that's a depiction of that. And the last piece here, you know, as Grandma was talking about, you know, we kind of carry this legacy of innuendo. Anything with the term indigenous, aboriginal, Indian, Native American, carries a kind of an energy that we're somewhat less. We're not the same as everybody else. We're somewhat less. We're diminished. Because that's the legacy that's behind the usages of these terms. Yeah. Thank you. So, in the next few minutes, I want to propose to you perhaps a different way of looking at Thanksgiving. The root word for us, mutabadantamo, the state of being in enough. Tabat. Tabat comes from tabi. Tabi is talking about enough. And what we're saying when we say that, we say that in our ceremonies. Tabat. We're saying to the source of life, you have fed me well. I'm thankful. My heart is full. Tapi, enough. I have enoughness. That's where that's coming from. I express, in every moment, in every opportunity that we have, we express that desire. That because when you have enough, everything's okay. And it's not a personal enoughness. My family has to be loved. The loved ones have to be loved. Everything is in its proper place, and I'm content. The idea, the spirit of that. Tabat. And we use it in that concept. And we're truly thankful. So those major times, every season has a time of celebration. Every season has that. And then there's ceremonies between the seasons. And there's daily ceremonies left up to the individual to do that. And I've learned over my own journey that if you make an effort to meet the sacred, it has a profound influence on the way that we think, the way that we live. Profound influence. I can feel it. I can feel it in this room. I can feel it in the opportunities that we have. But there's resistance. There's some of us in society that doesn't want to hear the other side of the story, perfectly content with the pretensions. Because we're really pretending that everything is right, and it's not. And when we continue to deny a voice of the other, a place for the other, if we deny the diversity, the richness and diversity, we all lose something of our personal integrity. I would much rather see out of every classroom who's depicting Thanksgiving with pilgrims and Indians, I would rather see take the Indian out. Don't even bother with this. But if we want to keep the Indian in there, then let's start working together to really know who those people are. Even more so. More so than that, let's really be thankful. Not just wait on one time of the year to express it, but to express it every single day. That Thanksgiving becomes the way that we live. Because that will make that journey, that 14-inch journey, meaningful and significant. But that's my story. I really wish, as again, that North Americans will begin to have a sense of what it is to be part of this land as family. Because I think that is the only future that we're going to have. If we're serious about future, then we're going to have to think differently from where we are now. If we're really honest with ourselves, and we look at the conditions of our life right now, if we're really honest, we know we're not well. We're a fear-based reality, a fear-based culture. We're afraid of everything. The source of why we don't trust each other. It's a social phenomenon in my head. It's a social phenomenon. An Indian country knows everything about you, but North Americans know nothing about Indian people, nothing authentic. We rely on stereotypes, rely on our prejudices, our hatreds, whatever it keeps us. There are a majority of North Americans that don't even know who Indian people are, never met an Indian person, never gone to an Indian community, and certainly don't know what's in the hearts and minds of Indian country. In all my travels, and visiting the relatives of the land, nobody's ever talked about building the big heart and sending you all home. Nobody's ever talked about it. But what they talk about is a meaningful relationship based on trust, based on respect, based on peace and friendship. We keep holding out for that. The only requirement that Indian country has ever had for the United States, for Canada, for the United States, the only requirement that Indian country has always held for them is for them to obey the law, to follow the law. If the United States government and Canada follow the law, which includes the treaties, our societies would know what peace is. Our societies would be living in the foundation of respect. And here you are in a classroom, right? Young people. And when you see the teacher picking on Indian people in the classroom, their peers, making fun of them the whole year, what does that tell them about Indian people, about Indian culture? That's the public education I grew up with on Cape Cod. There are people on Cape Cod that just hate Indians. There's certain towns that I can't walk down Main Street window shopping without being harassed by the police. I've had fun with it, I don't back away with that. It's an opportunity to have a little fun with it. Case in point. Just a real brief story. I'm walking for a while I was working at Plymouth Plantation. I took the bus, I had to take the bus. Living in Mashpee, so it's about 50 miles away. It's like, walk to the bus station, get up, come back. The bus doesn't go down to the Cape, so I'm walking from Buzzards Bay, where the bridge is, to my home in Mashpee. About 20 miles. So I'm in the town of Sandwich. Sandwich is on one side of Mashpee, and Falmouth is on another side of Mashpee. Sandwich is probably the most brutal, racist place when it comes to Indian people. So I'm walking down the highway, right? And ultimately, a squad car comes over, pulls me over. I'm just walking. Wants to know where I am, who I am, where I come from, where I'm going, and all this kind of thing. And I asked, well, is there some reason why you pulled me over? He says, well, I was afraid you might jump out into traffic and kill yourself or something like that. So I told him, well, I don't have to tell you who I am. I don't have to tell you where I came from or where I'm going, unless I'm violating the law. There's no reason for you to be pulling me over. So he's kind of upset. So I gets on the phone, gets on the calls his superior, so 3 other squad cars come. So, and this big burly guy, big Irish guy gets up, he's like 6'5", and he says, what's your name? I said, I don't have to tell you what my name is. Then he's saying out loud, well, I guess he doesn't know who he is. We'll have to bring him in. And I said, oh, no, I know who I am. You don't know who I am. Of course, then he's really livid and he's really red and so forth. But if at some point they see the wisdom of that, you can't do anything. But that's the town of Sandwich. And I don't know what it is that they think about, or what it is that town of Plymouth is still harboring. One of the elders depicted in the picture, his name is Frank James, a school teacher in the town of Chatham on Cape Cod. Brilliant man, very articulate. He was invited, Plymouth was having their 350th anniversary of the landing of the Mayflower. He was invited to be a speaker. And so he accepted the opportunity. He wrote out a speech, and the state wanted to see his speech before, and they didn't like what he wrote, and had a speech written for him. Of course, he didn't attend. I have a copy of that speech, and I'll have it it's in the package for you. But from that day, 1970, Wampanoag people, with our friends and with our allies, had declared that the American Thanksgiving is a national day of mourning. And we don't celebrate Thanksgiving strategically on that day until such time that life shifts between Indian country and America. Not just America, Canada is just like the United States and the treatment of Indian peoples. Until such time, that the government can shift their relationship to Indian country. And this is the hope that I have. Because sometimes governments need a little help. They need a little incentive. And that incentive clearly comes from the people that the government is supposed to be representing. If you're willing to sit here with us and be with us, if you're open to become family with us, become family with the land, then I think we have a future together. I also would say, in respect for the integrity of the life of the land and the life that we're given from the land, that future has to be molded. It has to be molded to a different way of thinking. It has to be shaped and molded and guided and led by women. Because we are living on a female planet in the context of ultimate understanding. We're living on a female planet, and Earth talks to every woman in this room in ways that maybe the women don't understand. But she's always talking to me. The principle of motherhood is so strong in creation. And this is not to diminish or demean the presence in the voice of men, because we have a profound influence in the shape of our families. Our children need us as much as they need the mothers. The shape of our family, often everywhere, not just in Indian country, but everywhere, the shape of our families is in serious condition because the fathers are not there. The men no longer know how to be men. I'm serious about that. Because we don't listen to the women. We don't follow their instructions. We don't honor their way of being, their way of understanding life. And until such time that we begin to understand that, and embrace that, then we have a future. And as one of the old Chinese proverbs say, if we don't change our direction, we're going to wind up where we're going. So thank you for involving.
Thank you so much. This has been an enlightening week. We've had the chance to talk. You've come to my classes. You were here for our Indian Ed for All workshop. And what you shared today was so meaningful, so we really appreciate it. We wanted you to have a print. One of our incredible Crow artists, Kevin Red Star. This was our 35th AIC NSU annual
poster for our powwow. And as the Crow medicine man and helper, we thought this would be meaningful for you, and we will ship it for you, I'm sure. We also have some other small gifts for you.
Thank you.
I haven't been feeding him all night.
So much. We'll do a few more drawings.
Mr. Mike Jetty, he is an enrolled member of the Spirit Lake Dakota Nation of North Dakota. Mr. Jetty is currently the Indian Ed Specialist at the Montana Office of Public Instruction. Over the past 21 years, he has worked in the fields of K-12 and university-level education. He has his bachelor's degree in history education, a master's in school administration, and an additional education specialist degree. Mike must have started his journey at 10. My goodness. Please help me welcome Mike Jetty.
For those of you who don't speak Dakota, that's just a traditional greeting. I said, hello, my relatives. I greet you with a handshake from my heart. And I said, in Dakota, my name is Low Eagle. I also carry a name in Cree. It's Blessing Eagle. I'm really honored to speak to you today and really humbled to hear Henry's words, your words, and it just makes my heart feel good. So I want to thank you for that. But since we're here to offer thanks, Jioanna told me to bring my drum. So I brought my drum along. And, this drum's got a little story here, too. It actually comes from a giveaway ceremony from a friend of mine, Conrad Fisher, who's known in Cheyenne. We used to sing with him with the Bobcat Singers. And so they're having a giveaway, and that's another form of Thanksgiving a lot of tribes have. And during this giveaway, I was very honored to get this drum. And then when I got the drum, a friend of mine in Lakota, Lance Blackboard made me a nice drumstick. This is Ichabu, Chanchega, and Ichabu. And my drumstick's real temporary. It's got the leather, it's a bead work, and what's it got at the end? Duct tape. But since we're here to give thanks, I thought I'd just offer up a prayer. And this is a prayer of thanks. And just thanking the Creator for what is sacred, for these powerful, mysterious gifts, and thanking the Creator for this life. And so, like what Henry said, you don't have to stand up for this either, because this song would be, you could stand if you want, I guess, if you need a strength. But this song would be used in ceremony, it's used in sweats, and, we're in the church, and, all of nature, or Unchi Makaza Church, the grandmother earth. And so I just offer this song up as a song of thanks. And I tell people that I will come speak for food and sing for food. The last 2 times I've been in Bozeman, I've been fed well, so thank you, Jioanna. And so I just offer the song up of thanks, and then I'll just share a few words about some of the resources from OPI. So this song is for you. Then after I'm done, please don't applaud. You can applaud in your heart, but I ask you to say, we are all related. All my relations, all you should say, Mikako Yasu. Say something in your own native language that means that. So how we end our prayers. Got my fancy bag here, wonky eye. Bring up the PowerPoint. Got a few things to share with you regarding Indian Education for All. And one of the honors I have working at OPI is I get to go out to schools all across the state of Montana and present information about Indian Education for All. And recently, the last presentation I did was in Indianapolis at a national conference looking at state social studies standards for the entire nation. And I got 20 minutes on their agenda, so I can really talk fast if I need to. But just scroll to the next one. Montana is the only state out of the 50 that has it written into our state constitution that we will teach about American Indians. And that is really unique. And a lot of other states say, how did we do that? I say, well, it wasn't me. It was 100 delegates that came together in 1972, all non-Indian, that had the foresight and wisdom to put this in our state constitution. And this is what forms the basis of what I do in my job, what Brandy does in her job, what Henry does, and for a lot of us in this room. And so, here's the law, Indian Education for All. And what I always like to focus on, it says every Montanan. And the last part, it says in a culturally responsive manner. And we heard examples of that already today, what it means to be culturally responsive in regards to American Indians. And I like to quote my friend Dr. Nicholas Vroman. He talks about, and this is reaffirmed this afternoon again, the inclusion of the whole story. And we haven't had the whole story for many of our years. And that's the exciting part of Indian Ed for All, is getting to tell that Native perspective, or Native American perspective.